Hello everyone and welcome to a new video of Mr. Mark Explains History. In the previous one we talked about the differences between capitalism and communism, and today we will start with the proper story of the Cold War in a bit more chronological order. And that story starts with the Russian Revolution, because that's when Russia became communist and when the Soviet Union was born, let's say. So the Russian Revolution is when Russia turned from an empire into the Soviet Union. So the Russian Empire became the Soviet Union in 1917, and this is when you could say the story of the Cold War starts, not the Cold War itself. That's another question: when does the Cold War start? Some people say 45, some people say 48. We'll talk about it later. But we have to start in 1917 when Russia became communist. So when, how, etc., how did it exactly happen? That's what we're going to talk about right now. So before the Soviet Union, Russia was an empire led by Tsar Nicholas II. And the Russian Empire was a massive empire. So on this map you can see only the western part, let's say the European part. There's also a whole Asian part. They owned, let's say, all the way to the Pacific Ocean. So it was a massive country, loads of different people living there, different ethnicities, different cultures, different religions. A massive empire. But most people were poor peasants, even were still serfs, and their life was not great. There was a small group of very rich people who lived amazing lives in St. Petersburg and in Moscow. Like those stories about, you probably have seen some movies about that, like their super luxury lives, and a lot of great art was produced, great literature. But for most people, life was terrible, was very bad in the Russian Empire. And let's say, already at the end of the 19th century, start of the 20th century, you see some developments that people are fed up with the system, and they just demand more rights, they demand a better life. So in 1905, we have a first revolution. We wouldn't say it's like the Russian Revolution. It's more just, it was like another revolution. So yeah, they demanded more rights. They thought like there's too much inequality in Russia, and people had no say in it. After this, there's a little bit more, like there's some reforms, there's like a constitution, but it doesn't change much. Most people's lives don't really change, and there's still barely any democracy or say in it. The emperor, the Tsar, still has most power. But this is important because you already see there's a big group of people that are very unhappy with the way Russia is run, with the economic system, with the political system, and they demand some changes. In 1905, this revolution is quickly put to an end by the army, but it shows, that something is going on there. In 1914, World War I starts. Russia is allied with France and the UK against Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire, the Central Powers. And in that war, Russia is not doing great. So on the Eastern Front, they're fighting Germans and Austrians, but after some initial success, they keep losing. So they are being pushed back, and it's not going great. Then Tsar Nicholas II, the Russian emperor, makes kind of a stupid mistake. He says, well, the army is not doing well, maybe I should lead it. But by making himself kind of the commander, people also blame him for the failure, let's say, for the Russian failures in World War I, because they keep losing also after Nicholas II takes over. So Russia is not doing great. Also, there's almost no food anymore, because a lot of food has to go to the soldiers, so the normal people have no food, and they are very unhappy. On the one hand with the Tsar, with the Russian army losing, with having no food, and just, being a terrible life for peasants. So in February 1917, actually March, but in Russia it's still February because of the other calendar, they start a revolution against the Tsar, and the Tsar also abdicates. He is gone. He, gives up power, and for the first time ever, Russia is not, not first time ever, but it's not a monarchy anymore. It's now more like a republic, and there's a provisional government, and they are deciding now what to do with the country, and they plan some elections and promise the people to do also better in the war. So in 1917, big revolution, the Tsar leaves, there's a provisional government, and they are now tasked to organize some elections and hopefully change the country in a good way. That does not really work out, and also the Bolsheviks, the Russian communists, they see a chance to seize power for themselves, and this happens in October 1917 in Russia, November in the West, and this is the second revolution in 1917. Both events, we could kind of say, the Russian Revolution. And here on the photo you see Lenin, the leader of the Russian communists, of the Bolsheviks, and he has 3 simple promises for the people. Peace, so make sure Russia ends in World War I, whether it's with a peace treaty or victory. Bread for the people. People are very hungry, so he promises bread and land, because before in the Russian Empire there was a lot of inequality. Most people owned no land, they just worked, and it was a terrible life for them, so he promises land and economic reforms. So peace, bread, land, this message resonates with the Russian population, and the communists take over, and they are backed by a large group of the people who think Russia is now going to change for the better. A totally new government, new economic system. And from that moment on, we could say Soviet Russia is founded. Soviet Union is founded. They do get peace, although the treaty is very bad for Russia. On this map you can see that they lose a lot of land. So there is peace, but they also have to give up quite some land to Germany and Austria. He delivered peace, and there's now peace in Russia, at least, and they can start working on recovering from the war and reforming the country. Although not everyone is very happy with the communists taking over, and a civil war breaks out. We'll talk a little bit more about it later. The conclusion is that after 4 years of fighting, the communists win. So from then, Russia is called the Soviet Union, and they are a communist state. And this is very important because from that moment on, the West is already, there's already tensions between the Soviet Union and the big Western powers, because they don't really like that. We're going to talk way more about that in the next video. So about early tensions between 1917 and 1941. So between the West and the East, there are already tensions because of this communist system and the Western democratic capitalist system. So the Cold War that started 45-48, well, you can argue about that, but for sure already decades before that there is tension, and the relationship between the West and the East is not great already. So we're going to talk about it in the next video. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.